Hey everybody, my name's Andy Wildrick. I'm the audio program chair at SAE Institute Nashville. I've been with the school for about 8 years and I've taught a variety of our audio courses. Today I'm going to help you work through the Pro Tools Crash Course. When I asked faculty, I said, what is the most important thing I could discuss with the students today in the Pro Tools Crash Course? Unanimously, they all said file management. The very first thing I have on the guide here, PTX Understanding. Pro Tools is launched. Now if I hit Command N, then it pulls up the new session dialog box here. So I'm going to call it PT Crash Course. We want a brand new empty project, so we select local storage up here. File type, WAV, that's standard. Sample rate, 48K is probably the most standard one nowadays. 32-bit float, standard as well. PT Crash Course. Okay, what we have to keep in mind here is that it's not making just a file for us. It's creating a folder and it's creating a special file within that folder. That's what Pro Tools creates every time we make a new session here. It always makes a new folder with a special file within that folder. We need to keep that folder together. We don't want to pull things out of that folder. So here, I'm going to take my time as we work through this. Here's what's going to happen. I've got to look down here. This should probably be toward the top because this is one of the most important items right here is location. Where it's going to make not the file, but where it's going to create the folder. Okay, so right now it's set to create it on my desktop. Now, if you're at SAE and you've got your external hard drive, you'll select that, and then you will select your glyph from the left side here so that it's going on your external drive. I'm going to go onto my desktop right now. That's just fine for me, so I'll leave it right there. It's going to make a new folder called this, and inside that it's going to be a .ptx file, and we want to leave those two things together. So here we go. I'm going to hit create. All right, and it makes a folder for us on the desktop that contains the .ptx file. So we can go and look at the contents of that folder. There's the PTX. Let's leave it there. We don't want to move it out of there. All PTX files associated with this session should stay within this folder. You can move the whole folder, but don't move any of the individual items within this folder. So next, we're going to talk about a common reason why the PTX gets moved out of there. So I believe what happens is students go up to File and they go down to look for Save, and Save's grayed out because it's letting you know that it's already saved to the most recent version. You've already saved it, and so it doesn't need to save that .ptx file again. So what students do is they go to Save As to a different location than that session folder. So when you click Save As, it does point you at the correct location within your session folder, but it's easy to navigate away from that page and save it in a random location like right on the desktop. And so then you've taken your session, it's in a session folder, and then you've created a new PTX file that's outside of your folder, so Pro Tools doesn't know where your audio files are, and that's where these issues arise. So what I did there was I went to File, I went to Save As, which is not what I want to do in this scenario, and I saved a .ptx directly to the desktop. That is not the ideal thing. That's actually the absolute wrong thing that will not function for what we want to do today. So the red flag that I need you to be aware of is that if you're looking on your desktop or you're looking in a like your hard drive and you see a PTX file just randomly floating, that's not good. The PTX file cannot just be randomly floating on its own. It's not like a Word document. This PTX file must exist within a folder. So within this folder, we have the PTX. That's good. That means if I want to move this folder, I can easily move it. I can drag it, move it to whatever hard drive I want, And when I launch this PTX file, it's going to launch perfectly because it's referencing the audio files that are right there within that folder. Now, a save as, putting it on the desktop, is a no-no. This will not work. If I try to launch it, it won't know what to do because it doesn't have those other things from the folder right here. Save as is used for this reason. Here's what when we want to use save as. Let's say that I want to put an audio file in here. I want to import a couple loops. Just real quick here, just importing these loops. We'll go over how to import audio in a second, but I just want to demonstrate more why we use save as. So I go up here and I'll say File, Save As, and I'll give it a name here, and I'll say Added Loops. So it's a unique name to specify what's going on in my Pro Tools session. And now here's the key. I need to make sure that this goes within this folder right here, which is where it's going to point you by default. So anytime you do a save as, it's going to point you to the correct location, which is within the folder. Now we want and we like when there's a bunch of PTX files within this folder. Those are the different versions of the session I'm working on. So let me show you what I mean. Now let's say that I delete a couple of these loops and I just left the conga and the shaker. Now I go to File, Save As, and I would say, instead of added loops, I would say only conga and shaker. Saving it within my session folder. Okay. Now what this does is when I click into that folder, now I've got 3 versions. If I double click and launch this one right here, it's going to launch the empty session I started with. That's great. If I click this one here, it's going to launch the version that has all 5 loops included, or 4, however many I had there. If I click this one, it's going to have only the 2. This is how we do different alternative versions of the same project. In Logic, they call this project alternatives. In Pro Tools, we call it save as. Here's the issue, though, just to reiterate. A student will go to File, Save As, and navigate away from this location. This location is perfect. This is where it should go. But they'll navigate away and say Desktop, boom, and now, sure, it'll let you do it. And now I've got a PTX on the desktop. But again, if I go to launch this, Pro Tools will not know where the attributes are that need to link to this. So I'm going to take both of those right now and delete them. Goodbye. I know this isn't the fun stuff, but this is the fundamental stuff. This is day one stuff that you need to know for managing Pro Tools. So if I do just want to save this iteration, cool. I go to save and it saves it right here. And it'll only ask me this once because I've been kind of making an example of this to kind of show how to do it the wrong way. But I could save it right there. And now when I go to File, Save As again, yes, it puts me in that right location. It's only because I navigated away. So that's kind of a good point, is if you do navigate away the first time, it's going to continue pointing you at that wrong location. And that's the problem. So here's the rule of thumb. This is all you have to remember. After you make the new session and you go to Save As, don't navigate away from where it takes you. That's it. Wherever it pops up here is the correct location. It's within my session folder. Okay, great. Now let's say I've got this session here. I want to move it to my external hard drive. Piece of cake. I can just pull up my Finder here, go to my glyph, grab this folder and drag it right over here. It's going to be no problem because it's going to make a copy of it. So I have one on the internal drive, another one over here. And there's that full session, and there's all the different iterations. PTX must exist within the session folder. Okay, let me get back to our guide here and see if I was long-winded enough. Now, we haven't done save copy in yet, but we've done some of these other things. So this final method I want to show you with file management is, let's say I imported a bunch of things and I can't really remember where they came from, and I can't remember where my PTX is, I can't remember where my folder is, but my session's up. My session's up and working good, it's sounding good, but what if I kind of forget where I'd saved everything? We have what's called a save your butt method. And in Ableton, they call collect all and save. In Pro Tools, we call it save, copy in. What it's going to do is take the existing Pro Tools session here, make a brand new session folder, and compile everything within that folder. It's really convenient. So here's how we do it. Again, this is if you're not sure where everything's saved and you know you need to make a new folder where everything exists. We go to File. We're going to go down to Save, Copy In. Now, the thing we have to remember here is to select a checkbox right next to audio files so that it's going to copy all the audio files to a new folder. Okay, we could even change the sample rate and bit depth at this time. If we had a video, we would want to say to copy the video over here. And if we have a bunch of takes and playlists, we could say only do the main playlist only. This will make the session a smaller size, but you will not have those other playlists to comp with. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. This time, it's okay to choose any location we want because it's going to make a folder, not a PTX file. So I can go down here to Glyph. I'm going to hit Save. It's going to make a folder. Okay, so let me go to Finder and show you where that is. I'll go down here to my Glyph. There's the new folder, and there's the audio files folder. That's that check mark we pushed. Now, there's the PTX file. We want to leave it within that folder, okay? PTX always needs to stay in its folder, okay? So that's the final method there for saving. So then to bring this home, let's say we wanted to email this to your instructor. Zip this up. We need to make sure that all of these files stay together. So I'm going to right click and go down to Compress. It zipped it up. Now you can use Google Drive, but I also like to advise our students to get used to using WeTransfer.com because you can send large files without needing an account. So I'm going to send this to myself from my work email address. I'll say Pro Tools session. Now I'm going to add the file up here. I'm going to go down to that glyph. I'm going to grab the zipped version of it. We're going to hit transfer. Now I think it will ask me for the verification code for my email. No worries. There's my code. Okay, I put the verification code in. And there's my files. They are going off to me. And once the person I sent those to downloads them, I'll actually get an alert that says they downloaded them. I really like that little feature there. So there's the details. And now if I look at my email here, I can see a download link for my files. I like WeTransfer because it's been around a long time. It's very reliable. And with Google Drive, you have to be a little bit more savvy because you have to upload it to Google Drive, and then you have to create a link. You have to share the link. You have to say if the person's in your network or not. There's more steps to jump through when sharing from Google Drive. With Dropbox, you kind of need an account for that to work. So this is your fail-safe for being able to. If you forget your hard drive at home and you need to get your files, you did a lot of work in the studio, send a WeTransfer to yourself and download the files once you get home and put them back on your hard drive. All right, Playback Engine and I/O. The first thing to do to make sure we get sound, I'm going to go back over here to Pro Tools. I'm going to start a new session again. We're going to do a bunch of these on my desktop. Okay, I want you to see this window a bunch. Remember, it's going to make a folder, and inside that folder will be a PTX file called this. We hit Create. I don't need to save this. That's okay. Now, I need to make sure I get sound. Before I do anything else, I got to go up to Setup, Playback Engine. This means where is it going to transmit the sound? I've got a bunch of locations. The computer has built-in speakers. The computer is also connected to a TV with built-in speakers, but then it's also connected to an interface, which can also provide audio to the speakers. So if I go to my system preferences, I look at sound, these are all the different options I could select as a playback engine. My TV, my computer, a couple other options there. The Thunderbolt is the one I want to use here. I need to make sure it's not on one of these other options, or I'm going to be very limited with what I can do. So I'm going to go up here to Setup, Playback Engine. And I'm going to make sure that it's on the Thunderbolt. See, there's those same options that we just saw. And this is the one that we need it to be. Universal Audio Thunderbolt. Okay, so there is our playback engine. Now, what goes along with this is another window down here called I/O. Now, this one is a lot more complicated, and I'm going to show you what will work probably 85% of the time to get things sorted out. Check one, just making sure my audio still works. So I've got my I/O map up. Now, if something's not working right, like you're not getting sound, something seems off, your playback engine's right, but you're still not getting sound, a lot of times what we need to do is come into the I/O, and we're going to click on each one of these tabs. Then I'm going to click Command A, which highlights all of the pathways, and then I'm pushing the delete key on the keyboard. So what I'm doing is I'm clearing out the I/O map, and I'm going to reset it. Okay, so now they're all clear. When they're all clear and I hit OK, and I go to make an audio track, it does not give me any options for an input or an output. Okay, it knows that we're talking to the Universal Audio Thunderbolt interface, but it doesn't know what ports are available on that interface. We need Pro Tools to see the map so it knows what inputs and outputs are available on this interface. Okay, so we can see that it doesn't see a map now because I can't select an input or an output for this track. So I've got to go back up here to I/O. I'm going to go over here to input, and I'm simply going to push the default button right here. Default. I'm going to go to output, push default. I'm going to go to bus. I'm going to make sure it's already defaulted, and under insert, I'm going to default it. You must do the playback engine first, okay? If you don't do the playback engine first, it will not know what to default it to. It's got to be in that order, playback engine and then I/O. And now when I look at all these tabs, it looks good, and I don't see anything in italices. And italices in this window means that it's confused and doesn't know what to do with that pathway. I don't see that. We're in good shape. I hit OK. Then when I go to select the input, there it is. And when I select the output, there's the output. But notice I've got nothing under bus. That means I've got an I/O issue still. So I'm going to go up to Setup I/O. I need to go to bus, and I'm going to delete all these again, and I'm going to default my bus paths. Now that looks better. Inserts look okay. Outputs look okay. We hit OK. And now I've got my bus paths available. My outputs, these are all the physical outputs that are on my actual interface. It now has an I/O map. I can customize it too from here, but the default setting is pretty good. Now this little speaker icon is saying that my speaker source is line 1 and 2. I actually don't want that. I actually want mon left and right to be my speaker source. So here's how we change that. We go into setup, we go into I/O. We're going to go over to output, the monitor path. There's that little speaker. We're going to say we want the monitor path to be mon left and right. And then it moved the speaker down there. Audition path, we also want that to be main left and right, monitor left and right. I'm actually going to designate all of these to be mon left and right. That's the last place that the audio goes. So that's going to work out for those settings there. I hit OK. And then when I go to output here, there's the speaker icon next to mon left and right. I know that that is going to route to my speakers. That's playback engine, I/O, and file management. Let's see what's next here on the agenda. Okay, we did, managing latency. Okay, so this is an easy concept. Playback engine, hardware buffer size. Okay, if you're using like a Scarlett interface, which a lot of our students are, then we do have to be extra aware of this window. If it's set high, it means that when I talk into the mic and the signal feeds into Pro Tools, I'm going to hear a delay. okay, because it's going to take a long time. It's going to take this many samples before the audio gets processed and spit out to the speakers. But I can say, hey, why don't you only use 64 samples to process the audio? That means the computer has to work a lot harder and a lot quicker to get the audio processed and then sent out to the speakers. So high buffer size if you're mixing, and low buffer size if you're recording. If we're recording, we care about minimal latency. I'm going to leave it at 128 for now. I'm going to play some guitar in a little bit, and hopefully this will be a low enough value that I won't have latency as an issue. So that's a pretty easy fundamental rule that we can remember. High buffer size for mixing, low buffer size for recording. All right, let's see what's next. Okay, getting into our show and hide options. When you first install Pro Tools, there's like a default way that the buttons show up or the menus show up, and we almost always want to customize it. Let's start with our toolbar. At the top here, this is our toolbar, and what I want you to look for are these little circles with triangles. We got one up here in the top right. We've got another one over here. We've got another one down here. Okay, there's all these little drop downs that are important to have available to us because they've got some pretty powerful features. The other thing that I need you to be able to see is this right here. This other one here is very important. Edit window view selector. Okay, so here's what I want you to be aware of. This triangle up here, very important for setting our menu or our toolbar. This right here, this right here. And these two are probably the most important one. This is going to establish what rulers we can view here at the top of our session. And this is going to establish what channel strip properties we can view here for each of our channels that we create. Okay, so here's how Pro Tools shows up right after you install it. It comes like this. So let me delete this track real quick. I'm going to make a brand new track, one mono audio track. And look, I've got no volume, I've got no plugins, I've got no inserts, I've got no I/O, I've got nothing available to me. So I've got to make sure those options show up. So I'm going to click right here, and I'm going to go down to those most common options. I like comment, so I can leave notes. That's something you can't easily do in Logic, not directly on the tracks. I want to see inserts A through E. I want to see sends. And I/O is the most important one because that's my volume for this track, and that's where the signal comes in and where it goes out of. The other ones aren't as important right now. We'll get into this a little bit later because, like I said, I'm going to be long-winded and thorough today so that you can always come back to this class and refresh yourself on these items. I really want to see minutes and seconds, and these other ones are the default ones. I don't need to see any other ones. I can minimize that with the triangle, so then I see bars and beats, minutes and seconds, tempo, meter, markers. That is pretty helpful. So up here, notice if I remove the checkbox, we lose a lot of our control options from the toolbar. Generally, what we like is the transport, so I can play, stop, record. MIDI controls, which is actually related to our click, track, and metronome. Synchronization, I don't need. That's if I want to link my Pro Tools session with another computer that's also running Pro Tools. That's a little bit more in depth, a little bit more unique. Ableton Link, we don't need to be showing, but it's a great new feature that allows us to feed Ableton into Pro Tools very easily. We don't have to use Rewire anymore. We don't have to do anything crazy. It just links to Ableton very nicely, but we don't need to see that for now. The output meters are really nice. We like the expanded transport because then it shows my pre-roll and post-roll options there. And that's about it. I like zoom controls as the last thing, but that's about all we need at the top there. We've got our edit modes, which this cannot be hidden. We always have our edit modes. We're going to go through those soon. We've got our zoom controls here. This is mainly for zooming in on a waveform, which we'll look at in a little bit. These are our main tools right here. This is our trim tool, selector, grabber. We'll look at what those do. These buttons are very important and very confusing, so I'm going to make sure I'm very clear with what these buttons are here in just a little bit. This is called our main counter. If you're making music, I want it to be on bars and beats. We need it to be on bars and beats. Minutes and seconds isn't going to help us as much with music. This is our grid. So all these grid lines here, we can show or hide those with that button right there. We like having a grid. Set to a 16th node is good if you're zoomed in. Set to a quarter node is good if you're zoomed out a bit. Pre and post roll, we'll get into that pretty soon. That's our transport. These are our MIDI controls. These are our output meters. So this button is very important. This button is very important for seeing channel strip properties. This button is very important. Now there's a little button way down here tucked away. It's this little button right here, and it's going to open up our clip list, which is incredibly important and powerful. That's how we export audio files from Pro Tools. Now there's another one of these circles with a triangle. That gives us control over whatever clips are in the session. We'll look at that pretty soon. But did you notice that by default this was closed? This incredibly important side column was closed down, and we need to open it up so we see our clip list. On the left side, we've got another one of those little buttons that you would never even know. It's so small, it's tough to tell it's there, but we need to see our track list and our group list. So it's very important that that is open and available as well. So what I'm trying to show you are these little things in the corner that open up these incredibly important menu options. Is it fun? Is it flashy? No, but it will help you out more times than not when you're hunting for a button and you can't figure out why it's not on the surface. Okay, let me bounce back over here to our guide. Playback engine, show and hide options. We showed and hide all the rulers, toolbar items. Now here are those buttons I was talking about that are a little bit confusing. But I need you to feel good about them. So I'm going to make a few tracks here. The first one I'm going to talk about is insertion follows playback. And the reason it gets toggled on and off by accident all the time is because the shortcut key for it is N, which is right above the space bar. We use the space bar all the time, but if you hit N, it's going to kick on insertion follows playback. So what does that mean? So here's the behavior of the transport when it is off. So I'm going to start playing it right here at bar 5. I hit space bar. It's playing it. When I hit stop, it's going to revert right back to bar 5. I hit play again. It starts right from bar 5. That's a pretty natural behavior. It starts and stops at the same point. Now, if I click on insertion follows playback, watch the behavior. I hit play. Now I stop it. It doesn't revert back to the original place. Depends on your workflow, but I believe that most students have it on by accident from hitting the N key. Okay, so I like that to be off. Now these other ones, the three left to the left, we'd like those to be on. That's very helpful to be on, and let me show you why. We'll go through these menus very soon, but I'm just getting an audio file in here. Now, here's what this button does. It's called Tab to Transients. So if I have my cursor right here, and I hit Tab, it's going to move the cursor forward to the next transient point. So if I hit Tab right here, it's going to move it right here. If I hit Tab again, it's going to move it right here to this transient, then this transient, then this transient. And if I hit Option Tab, it moves it back along transients. Now, you probably won't need this feature anytime soon. You may not need it today, but every now and then you need it. It's very helpful, and there's no reason to have it off, really. If I have it off and I hit Tab, it's going to move to the end of the clip. Now, this one here, you can leave on and not worry about it. If you don't understand how it works, it won't get in the way. It's okay to leave on. Link timeline and edit selection. So the timeline is up here. The edit selection is down here. For instance, if I select this, I just made an edit selection. My edit selection right here is linked to my timeline. My timeline is up here. These are in sync together. We generally like this behavior, but you can unlink them. And now I can make a selection. Notice that my ruler up here, my insertion point, stayed the same. Now I make a selection. It's not linking to my timeline. Not a total deal breaker, but there's often times where we want those to be linked. So you can link them and generally feel pretty confident that things are going to function nicely. I make a selection here, makes a selection on the timeline. I turn it off and make a selection here. Notice that this stayed selected. So I've got two different things to be aware of. It's kind of selecting two things at once. Next one here is another, it looks confusing, but it's not too bad. What this means is that if I make a selection right here, it's automatically going to highlight the track. Boom. Keeps things locked together. That's what those two buttons do. And I like the workflow when both of them are on. If I turn this one off, I make a selection, it keeps that track highlighted. Make a selection, keeps that track highlighted. Turn it on, okay? So the reason I'm talking about this so early is because I think you should get in a good habit of just having these options on. I think your smart tools should be on, and then tab to transients should be on, link timeline and edit selection, link track and edit selection, and insertion follows playback should be off. This one should be on as well. And actually, when you turn it off, it turns orange because that's a warning. It's saying, hey, are you sure you want this to be off? What this means is that if I go to copy or move a clip, it's going to move the automation data with it. We'll get into automation here in a little bit, maybe in about an hour, but we like it. We want it to copy the automation with us. These other ones you don't need on as much. What this mirrored MIDI editing means is that if I've got a MIDI clip, and I edit the MIDI clip, and I copy and paste that MIDI clip around, that each of those copied and pasted versions are going to mirror the original one. It's going to work the way aliasing works in Logic. It can be convenient. It's a workflow method. We'll get into that a little later. Not the most important item for now, and layered editing, definitely not the most important item for now. That's a little bit more advanced, but we get into it in our Pro Tools certification class that I love teaching for SAE, which I would encourage you all to take part in. Part number 2, here we go. Edit modes, edit tools, setting the grid, the BPM, importing audio. So let's start with the edit modes. This time we got to get some audio in here. These things don't make sense unless we're actually working with audio. So edit modes. So let me bring some audio files in. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-I. Command-Shift-I. I'm going to go to my folder for today's, with today's files, Pro Tools Workshop files. And I'm going to say, why don't we go ahead and pull some loops in? It's easy to work with these loops to start with. They're all wave files, and it's going to convert them to the session parameters. So the source, or the destination, meaning the session I'm at right now, is 48K. These samples are probably 44.1, which we could look at, which we might as well go look at, because I want you to understand what all these options do. So if I go over here to these workshop files, I want to identify what is the sample rate and bit depth of them. So I'll go to my loops. I'll right-click on one, go down to Get Info, and it's going to tell me that it's 44.1 24-bit. Get very comfortable with this window. Right-click, Get Info. Gives us great information. Tells us that it's stereo, 44.1 24-bit. But my session is 48K. So that's why it only gives me this option to convert them. We want to convert them from 44.1 to 48K to match my session sample rate. So that's all good. We click Open. You never need to navigate away from here. We want it to always import the files to the audio files folder. We hit Open. And here all these files are. Okay. I'm going to zoom out a bit. So the zoom function I like, which I'm going to talk about a bunch today, is Command bracket left. So that's Command plus the bracket key, okay, which is right next to P. Command and then the button next to P to zoom out, and then Command right bracket to zoom in. Okay, you can also use R and T to do the same thing, but I like Command bracket for zooming. Okay, Command bracket left, Command bracket right will zoom us in and out. Okay, so first let's start with our simplest edit mode up here with slip. With slip and the grabber tool, it means when I move this, I can just slide it around anywhere I want it to go. I can slide it nice and easily Nice and fluid, nice and smooth. Okay, the next easiest mode, grid. Now it's not going to move like that. It's going to move in increments that are based on our grid value. Okay, I could change the grid value up here to a bar, and now it's going to move in a bigger increment. We like grid mode. For music production, we try to keep things synced up to the grid. It's one of the easiest ways to ensure that your music will sound professional, is to keep it in sync with the tempo or the grid. So slip moves nice and easy. Grid moves in increments. Now here's a power move. Okay? You always have to go between slip and grid. Now, if you're in grid and you hold command, it's going to go to slip mode right now. Notice I'm in grid mode, but since I'm holding command, it's moving it nice and smooth. It's the same for slip. If I'm in slip and I hold command, it's going to move it in increments. So this means anytime I hold command, it's going to go between these two modes right here because we have to use them so frequently. That's really nice. So it's moving smooth, but then I hold command and now it's going to move in a grid fashion. So those two are pretty straightforward. Shuffle, I'm going to zoom out here. Now, first of all, watch what happens. Let's say I want to line these all up across one track. If I'm in slip, I would grab these and move them up here like this, and they would have a gap between each of them. There's this gap in time here. If I go to shuffle, actually, let me undo that and show what happens if I do it in shuffle. It automatically snaps it right next to the end of the clip in front of it. This is nice when you're laying out a bunch of different audio files. Maybe if you're trying to figure out a track listing for a record and you want to experiment with the order, you can move these things around very nicely with shuffle mode. So if I'm in shuffle mode and I've got this clip here and I drag it over here, it's not going to overlap the other clip. It's just going to shuffle the clips around so they're all still there. It's going to move one back that it's trying to overlap. Notice if I'm in slip and I drag this on top, boom, it just overlaps it. And the more I drag it, the more it just keeps overlapping it. So I'm going to hit Command Z a bunch to undo all of that. Get back to where we were. And now the last one here is spot mode. So I click spot, and I've got my grabber tool, and I select a clip, and it's saying, hey, where do you want this clip to go on the timeline? So I can say I want it to go to bar 44. Hit OK. I zoom out a bit. And there it moved it directly to bar 44. So this is more for sound effects for movies. When you got a specific point in the timeline or in the time code where you want it to be, select it under spot mode, and then you say exactly where you want it to go. You would go to time code, and you could punch in the exact time that you want it to go. So those are the four modes. You're probably not going to use shuffle and spot very much. Slip and grid are what you mostly have to worry about there. Okay, those are our editing modes. Moving along here, let's see what we've got next. Edit tool, selector, grabber, trim, and smart. Okay, that's these two right here. So remember, edit modes versus edit tools. So we'll start with trim. Let me make sure we can hear something. We got to actually play some audio. This is an audio school after all. Now, if you guys are going to hear this, I have to send it to output 3 and 4. You don't have to worry about that too much yet. Just want to confirm you can hear this. In just a second here, let's see what's going on. So we're starting with the trim tool. So it allows me to peel it in or peel it out. Okay, I can extend it as long as the audio clip will let me, and I can change this side as well. So that one is pretty nice, pretty straightforward. Know that it's called the trim tool. The next one, selector tool. This is going to move the cursor where I want it to be. I can make a selection with it. It stays the cursor no matter where I put it. That's when we like going to these single items, is because it just locks it into place. It's always going to be the selector tool. If I want to start playing over here, but if I was on insertion follows playback, it wouldn't necessarily work. If one of these buttons wasn't on, I couldn't necessarily just click right there and have it start. Notice I'm trying, But if I just turn those on, leave that one off, it's easier to click around and get it to start wherever. You don't have to go up to the top like you do in Logic. I think just Logic. And so that's the trim tool. Again, peels it in and out. Selector, I get to choose where it's going to play from, or I get to make a selection. Grabber tool is so I can grab a whole clip and move it around. Okay, so if I'm in slip mode, it's going to move nice and free. If I'm in grid, it's going to snap it around based on the grid increments. That's really helpful. Let me see what's next here. We did the edit modes. We did the edit tools. Those aren't as hard, I think, as some of these view options. View options aren't as straightforward. Link timeline edit, that's not that straightforward. But these are pretty smooth, pretty straightforward, pretty intuitive. I don't think you have to study those as hard. Setting BPM, grid, and main counter. Setting BPM, grid, and main counter, okay. So we need to get a click track going. There's no shortcut for creating a click track. We have to go up here to track, create click track. It makes a new track. There, it put it right here. I'm going to click it and drag it to the top. Okay. I'm going to go back to the Smart tool. I don't want to be on the scrubber, so I'm going to select this right here. So it selects all of them. Now I want to hear the click track, and I want you to hear the click track as well. So I'm going to change it to output 3 and 4. Now you need to make sure that the metronome is turned on up here. And it is. And I need to make sure that I also know the shortcut for metronome, which is number pad 7. Number pad 7 will do the metronome on and off. So I'll change this click. It's 3, 4. I'm going to go ahead and click this little S right here so it solos it, so we don't hear anything else. There's our click track. Now if I want to speed that click track up, I'm going to go up here to the tempo. And I'm going to change it to, let's say, 200, and I'll push enter. So we've changed the tempo. Okay, now here's what's really cool is we have a tap tempo feature. So if you highlight this BPM number and I tap the T button on the keyboard, it's giving me the value based on what I've tapped in. Once I find the one I like, I push the return key to engage it. And now we are at a tempo of 118. That's how we set the tempo. Now, if this isn't here, you can always hit Command 1. Command 1 will give us a pop out of the transport window. So I can do these controls from here, and then I could close the window. This is dependent on what tools you want available across your toolbar here. Command 1 gives us a pop out of our transport. This is where we set the tempo. Now, one thing that's tricky is this little guy here. He's a conductor. The only time we really need the conductor to be on is if our song changes tempo at various times. For instance, let's say the verse is a 100 BPM, and then let's say the chorus is 102 BPM. That means we need the conductor guy on so that he's going to change the tempo for us. But if we're leaving just one tempo for the whole session, we don't need him on. And actually, it's preferable not to have him on. It's a little confusing that he is on by default. I think that trips students up. They get used to using it, but really the only use for him is if your song is changing tempo as the song plays back. If you're locked into one tempo, you shouldn't need to do that. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is our main counter. So bars and beats is what we want, and you can select it right here from the drop down. For music, if you're staying on the click, staying on the metronome, staying on the grid, you want it to be on bars and beats. That's all good there. For grid, you want to keep this on a note value as well for bars and beats. We don't want it to be minutes and seconds for music production. Today's tutorial is mostly geared toward music, less geared toward post-production and sound for video games or TV shows. It's more about making a music production. So we like bars and beats for that. Let me see if I'm missing anything else. Yeah, music, bars and beats, film equals time code. We talked about the conductor track. So the conductor track real quick, here's how it works. I've got to open up the tempo ruler. I've got to turn on the conductor track. I'm going to grab this here to expand my tempo ruler so I can see it a little bit better. I'm just scrolling up so I can see there's my tempo. Now let's say at bar number 2, I want to change the tempo. So I'm going to place my cursor there, and then there's a little plus sign right here next to tempo. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to establish the new tempo. I'll say 120, and we can see that the tempo changes at that point. We can hear it too. And you could do it linearly. Right now it's changing instantly, but there's plenty of options. I want a linear tempo change. I want it to start at 120 and I want it to go down to 80, and I'll say apply, and now it does it as a linear drop down. See the tempo dropping. Really smooth how you can control tempo in Pro Tools. The thing to remember is Conductor Guy is built for this type of scenario. If the whole song is going to stay right at 120, we don't need the Conductor Guy. He's there to help deal with tempo change situations. We got our main counter up here we talked about. We've got our grid values right here. I think those items are pretty straightforward. You generally won't have to hop into that tempo ruler that frequently, but that's what you would do during pre-pro with your artists, is you'd figure out, how quick you want each part to be, and do you want the tempo to change as the song builds and plays back. And a lot of times you do, but you have to map it all out ahead of time. All right, importing audio. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to delete some of these items. Actually, I'm just going to hide them for now. I may want them in the future. So I'm going to select all the tracks. To do that, I select one. Then I hold shift and I select the last one in my list. So they're all selected. And if I right click on the track nameplate, I can go to hide and make inactive. They're still there, but they're tucked away on this left side. Now we want to talk about importing audio. The shortcut here, Command, Shift, I. Okay. Now we navigate to the file that we want. Okay, there is our files. Now the reason convert comes up is because it's got to convert from 44.1 to 48K. We don't want to just hit add. We don't want to hit add all. Here's the problem. If I click add, it means that these audio files are not actually going to be moved into the audio files folder of my session, which is, let me make sure I show you where that's at. Anything I import, I need to get into this audio files folder. If I click add, it's not going to actually move them into that folder. So then what happens when you go to turn your project into your instructor? Those files that you clicked add on aren't going to be a part of your session. Okay, add is bad. That's what I like to say to beginners. Add is bad, convert is good, copy is good as well. Now let me show you real quick when we get a different option there. I'm going to make a new session. This time I'm going to set it to 44.1. We'll just give it a random name. I'm going to make it on the desktop. I'm going to go to import audio. Those same files, this time I've got different options here. This time it says add all, or copy. Again, add is bad. I don't want to do add. I want to copy it. The reason I get copy instead of convert is because the file in my session are set to the same sample rate. We hit add, we hit open. It's going to give me the audio files folder. I never need to navigate away. I say open, new track. I want you to hear this track, so I'm going to set it to output 3 and 4. And that's importing audio in a nutshell. Hopefully that's pretty smooth. Command Shift I is your key command for that. Add is bad. Convert and copy are the ones we want. The goal that we have to keep in mind is we need to get the audio file from where it exists on your computer to the audio files folder. It's got to go in that audio files folder, or it won't actually be included in your session when you go to move it. And your sessions need to be mobile. You got to be able to move them around to various studios or to send them to various people. Moving on to the next one. All right, so let's bring in a multi-track now. I'm going to hit Command N for a new session. I'm going to call it multi-tracks, just for the heck of it. And let's set it to 48K because it's standard. We can say save that. Now I'm going to bring in a multi-track, and you guys can do the same here. I hit Command-Shift-I. I'm going to go to the workshop files, and I'm going to go to multi-tracks, and I'm going to go with this aha track. So to quickly highlight all these, I'm going to hit Command-A for all. Now, I don't want to add them, so copy is what we want. It's going to copy them all, and it's going to import them real quickly because it's not having to convert the sample rates. So it's going to be in a snap, they're going to be in our session. Now, if they were another sample rate, it would take a long time, but this just has to, boom, bring them in. This option comes up. New track is generally what we want. We could tell it to be on a new track automatically right here in the edit window. If I hit clip list, it's going to tuck them away on the right side, and I'd have to drag them in one at a time. Depends on what we want, but mostly we like this new track option. Now we have all these tracks, which means things could be really, really loud. So I want you to get used to this cool little feature that comes with Pro Tools that you cannot delete, that's automatically on every session. It's called All. It's the All group. If I select the All group and I go to move the volume down on one channel, it moves the volume down on every channel. Gives us a good starting point here. Now, these waveforms look really big. It almost looks like it's distorting, but it's just a visual thing, not an actual audio thing. So to reduce the size of the waveforms, I go up here to my zoom controls, and this is audio zoom out, and it reduces the size of the waveforms. Doesn't change how they sound, just changes how they look. So I've reduced everything on the all group. Let me see what's next here. So we use the all group. We like the all group. It allows me to do things quickly to every track at once. Now, why don't we go to this one first before we move on to this one? So this is one of our longest components today. This is kind of like the nitty gritty. These are the things that are most important. Can you subgroup the tracks? Can you group the tracks? Can you use send and returns with time-based effects? This is like 40% of AUD 200 right here. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing I want you to know is that you can organize your tracks very easily from this left side right here. If you hold Option and click on a track nameplate, it removes the selection. Now I want to move these tracks in order. So I'm going to start with drums. So I'm going to say drum sequence 1. I just need to click and drag these into the order I want. It's very smooth, very intuitive. I'll leave the Vox at the bottom. I want keys to be right before the vocals. I want drums, bass, guitar, and then this is more keyboard here. So there's guitar. I need to move this up here because that's drum, snare, bass, and then guitar, and then keyboards, and then all the vocals. So they're in a decent order right now. So what I want to do is take these drums and subgroup them. Okay? So right now, they are all going out of line 1 and 2. I don't want to do that. I want to combine them with a subgroup. I'm going to show you the quickest way first. So I've got these selected. Now on my keyboard, I have to hold down Shift as well as Option. It means apply a function to every track that's selected. So now I'm going to go to the output and I'm going to go down to New Track. This is a quick way to do a subgroup, and I'm going to call it drums. And I don't need to select this. If I leave this selected, it's going to make the new track up here. But if I deselect it, it's going to make the new track down here, which is where I want it to go. It automatically pulled these parameters in automatically because it's recognizing what I'm doing. And now look at the output for each of our tracks. It's called a new name. It's a new bus path called drums. It feeds into this track called drums. And now if I want this to go out to you guys, I'm going to click the S to solo each of these tracks. And now I'm going to hit play and slowly bring these volumes up. We've subgrouped our drums. The last thing to do after a subgroup is to hold Command and click the solo button on the aux track. This means that I don't have to click this to be able to hear these tracks that are feeding into it. It bypasses this solo, gets out of the way because it's kind of redundant, so we can do what's called solo safe or solo isolated, so that these tracks automatically feed through this aux track. That's a subgroup, and you have to be able to do that to work with audio. Whether you're doing sound for a concert, sound for film, sound for an artist, you've got to be able to subgroup things. We do not want to leave everything going out just right out of the same output. Everything's going out 3 and 4. We've got to compartmentalize components of the mix to get it to work. So again, if I want to get these from line 3 and 4 back into here, I would select all of them. I'm going to hold Shift and Option. I'm going to go to the output. This time I've already made the bus. So I'm going to go down to bus, and I'm going to go down to drums. And now the drums are all feeding into this one. Let me show you another way to do subgroups. 2 more ways, actually, we're going to see how to do subgroups. First, here is the original way that is what you had to do 10 years ago to do a subgroup. It's not hard, but we need to know all the different methods. So I'm going to make a new track with Command Shift N. Command Shift N for new track. I want it to be a stereo aux input track in samples. And the name, I want it to be called Drum Bus. Now I've got a track here called Drum Bus, but nothing's feeding into it. I'm going to go up here to my drums, change the output to bus 1 and 2. I'm doing this one at a time. I'm trying to be very slow and meticulous so you guys can follow along. Those are all going to bus 1 and 2. Now the input for this needs to be bus 1 and 2. The output I want to go to you on Twitch, which is output 3 and 4. And then I need to solo safe my bus. That's the original method that you use to make a subgroup. Here is the newest school way. Okay, so I'm going to make these all back out to where they were. The new school way. Pro Tools introduced folder tracks a couple years ago. And what we want to do is route these to a folder track. It's not only going to subgroup our tracks, but it's going to keep them nice and organized. To do this, we're going to right-click on the track nameplate, and we're going to go to Move to New Folder. We want this to be a routing folder. We're going to say Route Tracks to New Folder, and we'll call it Drum Bus again. It's routing them. Now it gave us this nice option where not only is it being subgrouped, if I solo these, we'll only have the drums. I want to make sure it goes to you, so I have to say output 3 and 4. But now not only are they routed there, but I can close them up and hide them. And I see these bars here let me know that there's 4 tracks that are being subgrouped there and they're being hidden. That's the best method. So I wanted to show you all 3 methods. So let me just review them with you real quick. I'm going to undo this. So I'll go to, I think if I just go to the delete key, it'll do it. Delete. I want some folders to be contained. Would you like to delete I want to keep them. I want to keep the members. So here's the original way that you did a subgroup 10 years ago. Make a new stereo aux input track. Set the input for that track to be an available bus. Set the output for these other tracks to be that selected bus. So I'm holding Shift and Option, changing the output to bus 1 and 2, solo safing it, making sure that this is going to you. Boom. There is the original way to do a subgroup. Okay, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to delete this track. I'm going to show you method number 2 for making a subgroup. So I'm going to set these all back to output 3 and 4. Okay, this is the way that came out about 5 years ago. So I'm going to select all these tracks. I'm going to hold Shift and Option, go to the output, go down to New Track. A really nice, handy button. We'll call it Drums. It routed everything down here to this drum bus. Okay, very nice. And now the last method, the new school method, which is probably the best method, and Logic has had this feature for a while. I want to right-click all the tracks that I want to go into this folder track. I'm going to go to Move to New Folder, Routing Folder, Route Tracks. We'll call it Drum Bus New. And there, it tied them all in. We'll make sure that this is output 3 and 4. Solo safe it. That's subgrouping in a nutshell. Now, to move along with this, I should get my color coding under control. These are all randomly colorized right now. That's not that helpful. So for drums, I want them all to be blue. So what I did there was I'm making sure that all of these tracks are selected. So I'm selecting the first one, holding Shift, and then selecting the last one. Then I open the color palette by double-clicking on the left side of one of these tracks. And then from here, I can set the color that I want. Okay, so I'll select blue. So I like this blue color on the left, but I want these clips on the right to be blue. So I go up to this drop-down and I change it to Clips and Tracks. And then I select that same blue. Oh, whoops, I needed to be selected here. There we go. And now I can go to Clips and Tracks, select that same blue color. So I can see that my tracks are this color. Then I go to Clips and Tracks, and it's the same color. That's what we like. So all my drums are blue. Why don't we go ahead and do the keyboards? Because there's a ton of keyboards on this 80s track. So there's a synth. I'm going to come down here to my keys. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to right-click. We're going to go to Move to New Folder. We're going to call it Keys. Route Tracks to New Folder. It's doing its thing. There they go. Now we need to color code them. So I'm going to select all the clips. So I'm holding Shift while clicking the clips. There's a little quicker way I could do this. I'll show you in just a second. I want to color code them, so I'm going to click right here. It's telling me all the colors that they currently are. I'm going to say, let's make them all red. And then I'll go to Clips and Tracks and select the same color red. And there we are. So now we've got our drums that are all blue. And we've got our synth tracks, which are subgrouped. And they are color-coded. Now, one more thing. I need to make sure that not only are they subgrouped, but they are grouped in the regular way. I call this a control group. I'm not sure if Pro Tools calls it that, but I say that there's a subgroup, which is when we route things to a bus, so they all go to the same location. And now we've got to group them so that when I click solo, it solos all of them, or when I click mute, it mutes all of them. So the way we do this is we select all the tracks we want to be in that group, and we hit Command G for group. And now it's just confirming, hey, here's the tracks that you selected that you want to be in this group. And I could call those keys. And then right now I'm telling it to follow globals. What this means is that I want each of these tracks to be linked together with the parameters that are set up here in this globals window. So what that means is that my volumes are linked, my mutes are linked, the record enable button is linked, solos are linked. Let's say that I don't want record enable to be linked, but I want all these other things, and I hit OK. So if I click solo, it should solo all of them together. If I click mute, it should mute all of them together. If I click record enable, it should only do it on this one because we customized that parameter. To change it back, this is why this window needs to be open. I've got my key group selected, and then I select this drop down here, which is called the group list pop-up, and I'm going to go down to modify group, and then that's that same window I was just on. I can say, don't follow the globals, and I want you to follow these specific attributes. I want you to group this together, but don't group the solos. Don't follow the globals this time. I hit OK. Solo isn't grouped, mute isn't grouped, but input monitor is. Record enable is grouped. So it's a good way to figure out what things you want to be grouped and which ones you don't. I would say most of the times follow globals is good, and leaving these global parameters as the default is pretty good. It's pretty smart with where it automatically points you, but I can see that this window can look a little bit complicated. It's a little bit scary sometimes, but it's not too bad. Let me show you how to make a group again. So we subgrouped them, but now we want to group these drums. So we select all of them. I hit Command G. I call it drums. Tell it to follow globals. Hit OK. And now it's going to solo all of them. Input monitor, mute, record enable. Oh, record enable it's not doing. So that means if I go to modify group and I go to globals and I tell globals to include this mix attribute, now the record enable should be linked, which it is. That's grouping and subgrouping. We're still not done with this slide yet, because next we've got to do time-based effects. Let me make sure that everything's all good. And okay, let's see here. It's 3:22 and it's time to do time-based effects. So let's get down to a vocal track here. I'm going to solo the vocal, and I'm going to click solo clear, which is right up here in the middle. This will make sure that no tracks are soloed in the session. Now I'm going to solo just the lead vocal. I want you to hear it, so it's going out line 3 and 4. And we're hearing those other things because I had solo safed these drums. I actually don't want them solo safed right now. I want to just hear our vocal.
Talking away, though I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway.
Let's say we want to add a plate reverb to this vocal the textbook way, the way you would be expected to do it when you're working on the job for somebody else. So here's what we do. First, we're going to do it the quick way. We're going to go to send. We're going to go send it to a new track. We're going to call it plate. Stereo aux input, all good. We hit create. Okay, now it's asking me, how much of this vocal track do you want to route into this newly created aux track? If I hold Option and click the volume fader, it moves it up to unity gain. It means send an exact copy of this level of signal into this aux track. I want it to go to you, so I need to say output 3 and 4. I want to solo safe it. And next, I need to put the reverb on. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go to Valhalla. I'm going to grab Vintage Verb. And let's throw a plate on. So I'll go to my presets here, go down to plate, go to vocal plate. 100% mix is what we want. And so now this fader can be treated as a wet and a dry fader. The more that it's up, the more reverb we're going to hear. The lower it is, the less reverb we're going to hear.
Talking away, though I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway. Today is another day to find you shine.
We need you all to know how to do it with this type of procedure. We don't want you to put the reverb directly on the track. It causes a lot of limitations, and it doesn't demonstrate that you understand signal flow. We need you to understand and feel very comfortable at routing these signals around using these internal bus paths. Okay, these internal bus paths are what allow us to compartmentalize different components of the mix. We can't just leave everything going out to the speakers. It will never sound polished that way. So this is the routing that you got to do. I'm going to do it one more time for you from scratch. I'm deleting it. I'm deleting the send. I'm even going to hide all these other tracks. So I'm selecting every track. I'm going to go to hide. Hide and make inactive. So all we can see is this vocal. I want you to focus everything on this vocal, making sure we can hear it.
I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say.
Okay, we want to add reverb. So we're going to go to send. We're going to send it to a new track. This is going to automatically create a stereo aux track, and it's going to automatically connect a virtual bus path to that newly created aux track. So this does 2 steps for us in once. That's why we like it. We say new track. We'll call it vocal verb. It created the virtual bus path, which we could even see if I go up here to setup and I go to IO and I go to bus. we can see that new path it just created called vocal verb. It actually adds it to the IO map as we create it, so I can use it. And it saves with the session. We like that. It's a good thing. And it happens automatically when we do that button right there. Now we want to solo safe it. Now we want to go to a reverb. Now we want to change this to output number 3 and 4 so you can hear it. And now this fader is how much of the reverb we're going to hear. How much of this signal are we routing into this aux track?
Oh, I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway.
That's time-based effects in a nutshell. That's the textbook way to set it up. I hope you all feel pretty comfortable with that. We have to do lots of that at SAE for live sound and for recording. We don't want you just putting the reverb directly on the track. So thank you for very much internalizing this section. Let me see what's next. That was our longest one. Virtual buses, groups. We didn't talk about this part yet. Master fader versus all instruments. Let's get through it. This is very important. Master fader versus all instruments bus. The master fader can trip people up quite a bit. So what I want to do is bring those drums back up. So if I click these little circles, it's going to bring back my hidden tracks. And I don't want the vocals anymore. So I'm actually going to make those inactive. I can right click to make that adjustment. Hide and make inactive. I just want us to see drums. Right now they're still deactivated. If I right click on them, I can say, okay, make them active again. I love that you can hide things and put them in the corner. When I finish a production for people, I often have all these tracks that I just don't use anymore. It's not taking up any CPU, but if I need to get them back, I can always bring them back in the mix. So let's make sure we got some drums here. Now the master fader situation can cause some confusion. So first of all, here's how we create it. Command-Shift-N, and then we're going to make a stereo master fader track. The output that you select for the master fader matters very much. Right now, the output for my drums is 3 and 4. But my output for the master is 1 and 2. This means that my master fader isn't doing anything. We don't see any signal there. If I want it to link to and actually have some control over these other channels, I need to match the output. So the drums are going out line 3 and 4. I need to tell the master to also be set to line 3 and 4. Now the master is activated. Now let's say I want to put a plugin on the master that's going to affect all of these tracks. I would go over here. Just grabbing an EQ. This EQ is going to affect all the drum sounds. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward, but here's what's a little bit confusing about it. Actually, let me get a compressor on here so I can illustrate this a little better. I'm changing that EQ for compressor. Let's see how much compression we're getting. So a little bit. Now here's what's a little bit counterintuitive. If I lower the master fader amount, it reduces the amount of signal going into this compressor. If I raise the master fader level, it increases the amount of level going into this insert. What this means is that this fader here is pre-insert, meaning that as I turn this up, it drives the signal more into this insert. As I lower this, it lowers the amount of signal driving into this insert. I kind of want the compression level to stay put, and I just want this to be post-insert, okay? To do that, we have to change our workflow just a little bit. So the biggest thing here to remember is that the master fader is going to affect any tracks that match the output. This output line 3 and 4 is the same as the drum output 3 and 4. So that means that the processing on the master fader is going to affect whatever's going out 3 and 4. I raise this fader, it's affecting how much signal goes into this processor. I lower this fader, it's going to lower how much signal goes into this processor. Now the other method is to create something called an all instruments bus. So I'm going to create a new stereo aux track here. Okay, now the input for it is going to be, I'm just going to pick an open bus. So I'm going to say bus 7, 8. Now I'm going to feed the drums in there by saying bus 7 and 8. So now my drums start here. They're going up to this track. And then from this track, they're then going down into this track, which I'll call all instruments. You may have to review this section of the video a couple times for it to feel good. I'm going to solo safe it. I'm going to do the same thing I did a second ago. I'm going to put a compressor on it. I'm going to make sure the signal is going to you. Now let's hear that compression level and hear the drums. Now let's say I want to get a little more compression. I'm going to adjust the compressor itself. I'm going to turn up the all instrument bus fader. It turns up the output of this compressor. It doesn't affect how much signal is going into the compressor. And if I lower it, it doesn't affect how much signal is coming out of the compressor. It's just, it means that this is post insert. I lower this, but watch my meter here. The compression amount's going to stay the same. We like that. That's a good thing. Okay. Remember with the master fader, when I moved this, it was changing the amount of signal that was hitting the compressor. So generally, when you have a master fader, you just want to leave it at unity gain, so it's not going to add another gain stage to the mixing process. There's no right or wrong situation here. The right thing to know is how each function and to be able to describe it to somebody. Recording audio. Okay, I'm going to get a new session going again now. Command N for new session. We'll call it recording. Go ahead and create it. I can save this session. That's all good. Okay, I've got an empty session. The first thing I got to do is check the playback engine. Okay, that's all good. I'll go ahead and check my I/O map just to be in the habit of making sure I see all the pathways there. It even keeps those pathways I created from the last session. We hit OK. We're all right there. Now we've got to record a track. So I've got two options here for making a new track. I could go up to track and go to new, or I could use the shortcut, which is Command Shift N. I'm going to record one track at a time. So one mono audio track in samples is all good. I want it to go to you. So that's line 3 and 4. And the signal is going to come from input number 7. Okay. And I want to label it. So I'm going to call it guitar. So this is recording 101. I've got my track set up. So I'm going to save my work by hitting Command S. Now I want to hit I, which means input monitor, which means open up the pathway to line input 7 so that if my guitar is making sound, it's going to feed into this track, which it is. Now I'll hit record enable if I'm ready to record something. Now if I'm going to record something proper, I better get a click track going. So I'm going to go to track, create click track. I'm going to send it out 3 and 4 so you guys can hear it okay. I'm going to speed the click up just a little bit here. Maybe a little slower. Okay, that's called guitar. Line input 7 is what's feeding in there because I've got the guitar plugged into input 7 on the Apollo. Now the guitar is plugged into a DI. It's going out of the DI and into the Apollo on channel number 7. So I want to show you how to do basic recording, but then how to do loop recording, which is when things get a lot more exciting. You can do things on your own. You don't always need somebody there to engineer you. So let me get the guitar. My signal's a little hot coming in, so I'm gonna lower that just a slight bit. Now what I want to do is make sure I can record this properly. I need to hear the click track properly. And so I'm going to hit record, and then I want to come in and hear it bar number 2. I got to come in at exactly that point so that I can use the playlist features. So here we go, 4 clicks, and then I'm going to record. That's a little quick for me, so I'm actually going to slow that back down to 105. Now, I don't need to delete that recording. I just need to make a new playlist. So I can always save every take. So I'm going to hit Control and then /, which is the button directly above the return key. Okay, and it says name for new playlist. You can leave the default name. And now I'm going to hit Command S to save my work. I'm going to hit number pad 3 to kick on the recording. And here we go again. And now it's a little too slow. So let's take that back up to about 110. New playlist and record enable, and here we go. Okay, so 2 passes of those, a little loosey-goosey, so now we're ready for another take. Control / new playlist, record. I need to come in after 4 clicks exactly again. And I want to do just one more take so that we can see the playlist. Control / number pad 3 to record. Okay, I don't need to spend a lot of time recording today. What I want to show you mostly is the way that playlists work. All right, this is very intuitive, very smooth, and it's easy to understand. So I finished recording. So I'm going to turn off record enable. I'm going to turn off input monitoring. Now I want to see those various takes I did. I'm going to click what's called the track view selector and go to playlists. And there's the different takes that I gave it. Those first 2, kind of like figuring out the tempo. I'm probably not going to use those. So if I want to hear the last take I did, I click the S right here. If I want to hear the take before that, I click that S. And this is where I get to judge and figure out which one's the best. So the way you want to do this is I want to start with a clean slate. So I'm going to click this little drop down here, which doesn't have a name, really. Well, the playlist selector, I'm going to click that and go to new. And I'm going to say that's okay because I want just a blank track up there. And what you do here is you listen to each of the takes. Let's say that I like this section here. I would hit Option Command V, Control Option V. Takes this from here and it moves it up to the main playlist. Control Option V does the exact same thing as this up arrow right here. So if I highlight this section and hit Control Option V, it shoots it to the top. If I highlight this section and I click this little arrow, it shoots it to the top. So what you do when you're making a comp is you'll have like this section right here. And then let's say that I wanted this take for this section right here. And let's say that I wanted this take for the rest of it right here. And that's going to piece those together. And then I remove the solo from one of these playlist lanes. We call these alternate playlists, and we call this the main playlist. The main playlist is the one that we're actually mixing. That's the one we're actually going to hear. But we use the alternate playlist to make sure we've got a really good main playlist up here. And then we can trim them around. So let's say we like our little comp there. What we need to do is make little crossfades at these edit points. There's two quick ways to do this. Number one, I've got the Smart Tool on. So if I hover toward the bottom of the track lane, I get this thing that looks like a box. And I click and I select. I click and I drag, and it makes a crossfade. It ensures we won't have any pops and clicks during those edit points. There's a quicker way to do it. Let's say I've got to edit 3 different points at once. I need a fade in here, I need a crossfade there, and I need a fade out at the end. So if I highlight across all of that range and I hit Command F, I get what's called my batch fades window. It's saying at the point where it goes from empty space to a clip, what would you like the fade in to be like, and how long do you want it to be? At the point where it goes from a clip to another clip, what would you like the crossfade to be like? How long do you want it to be? I can say 20 milliseconds. I want the fade in to be 15 milliseconds, and I want the fade out to be 15 milliseconds. So if I hit OK, boom, it handled this fade, this fade, this fade, and this fade. It did all 4 of those fades for us automatically. We call that batch fades. I don't think it's been around for more than 4 or 5 years. Very powerful feature there. That's recording in a nutshell. Let me show you one more awesome feature for recording. Loop recording, something I use a lot when I'm trying to come up with a part, I'm writing. Let's say I want to loop a section. I'm going to go ahead and make a new playlist because we're going to record onto the new playlist. Let's say I want to record over, let me make sure I'm in grid mode. I want to record this section over and over again. To do this, I need to make sure that I right-click the play button and select loop, and I need to right-click on the loop button, or on the play button and select loop. You can also do those from options, loop playback, loop record, or you can do them right here from the transport. What this means is that it's going to keep looping this section, and it's going to give me a new playlist every time it loops back around. Here we go. Let me make the section 4 bars long, actually. And this time, I need to make sure I do something different, because if I just hit record right now, it's going to start right here. But I need to have some runway. So I'm going to go up here and click this button called pre-roll, and I'm going to set it to be 1 bar of pre-roll. So that way I'm going to get a count in before the recording actually starts. That's very important to have. Command K will kick the pre-roll on and off. The pre-roll settings are right here. Pre-roll is how much time are you going to hear before the recording. Post-roll is how much time are you going to record after the recording finishes. So I should have 4 clicks, and then I'm in. We hit stop. Boom. There's all the takes that I just did. All 3 of them. They came back. Really convenient, especially when you're recording yourself, especially when you're writing. That's loop recording and recording in a nutshell, and also some comping action there. Let me make sure I got everything I wanted to get from our slide. We did subgrouping. We did recording audio using playlists, making a comp. The shortcuts are very important. One shortcut I didn't do yet. Let's say that I don't have my playlist showing. I just have this take right here. I really like this feature. This is another thing that keeps me in the Pro Tools world. I always have to comp. Comping is very important, and this shortcut makes comping a breeze. So I'm going to set it to play this section back. I'm going to turn off my pre and post roll with Command K. I need to make sure I hear it, so I have to turn these options off right here. Now let's say that I want to comp this as it's playing back. If I make a selection and I hold Shift, Command, and down arrow key, it's going to go toggle between the various takes. So here in practice, here's what that looks like. I can loop this whole section. So what I'm doing is bringing in some of the various takes as it's playing back. So I'm building the comp without having to open this window up and highlight the sections. You're able to kind of stay a little bit more focused. To me, that's a super game changer feature. That's something I use every single day when I'm comping. That shortcut is a game changer. Only three shortcuts I want you to know for comping. Number one, new playlist, which is Command /. Number two, which is grabbing a piece from an alternate playlist and shooting it to the main playlist, which is Control Option V. Okay. And then the last one there, which is as it's playing back. Well, it doesn't even have to be playing back, but I can highlight this section, say Command Shift down arrow key, and it's going to bring in the various playlists that are directly below it. Okay. So hopefully we feel pretty good about all that. We're going to get to matching alternates in a second. That's the end of part 3 because we already did the loop playback. We did turning the all group down a long time ago, and let's keep moving along here. Making fades, we already did that, so we don't have to do that too much here. We do got to get to these other elements going on here. We're going to get a beat going here in a second. Actually, why don't we move right into that? We'll go into this slide right here. We did making fades. Now we're going to go into getting an instrument track up quickly. Now, this I'm kind of, the reason I want to do this part is because a lot of students have said, you know, I go to Logic or I go to Ableton because I can quickly get a beat going really fast. I can quickly get a composition going really fast. So I want to show you in Pro Tools, we can get things going pretty quick as well, especially with some of the new features. So I'm going to say making a beat. Okay, let's see how quickly we can get this up there. I'm going to go ahead and save that recording. Now I've got to make a new instrument track. So Command Shift N, then if I hold Command right arrow to get stereo and then Command down arrow, I can get to the instrument track. Okay, I want to make a beat. So I'm going to put battery 4 on. So I got to go to Insert, first slot, multi-channel plugin, which means stereo linked. And then I'm going to go down to Instrument and I'm going to go to battery 4. Okay, now I'm going to grab a kit, and I'm going to set this out 3 and 4 so you guys can hear it. I'm going to set it to record enable. Now, here's an awesome new feature. If I hit Command K or Shift K, notice what it brings up. A little MIDI keyboard. Well, we're going to need a click track here going. Okay, and then I'm going to tell it to quantize automatically as well. So from my selector right here, I'm going to go to MIDI real-time properties. I'm going to select quantize. I'm going to tell it to quantize to the 8th note. So again, you can do all this in Logic, Well, we can do it all in Pro Tools. So now I'm going to set it to record. I'm going to make a beat that it's going to quantize automatically. I got to make sure I hear the click track, so it's got to go out 3 and 4. Okay. Okay, really crazy, bad beat, but it's already quantized. It's ready to roll. There's a beat. It's up and running pretty quick. Now, let's say we wanted to do loop recording just like we did with audio. You can do it, but they have a little bit of a different name for how to make it happen. So we're going to do loop recording here. I'm going to delete what we have there. I'm going to set it to just be this bar right here. Okay, I'm going to give it a pre-roll of 1 bar once again. And here comes loop recording, quantizing it as we go. Okay, but now if I go over here to the left, I don't have that playlist option. So here's what we got to do. We're going to highlight the place where we made the recording. I'm going to right click and I'm going to this little thing called matching alternates. And that's saying, hey, I'm going to show you all the recordings you did during that interval of time. There's my first one. I can turn off pre-roll again. And if I go to matching alternates, there's the second one. So we can do loop recording with MIDI and with audio. It's no problem. It's just right-clicking and going down to match alternates to find those various ones. And then we can leave it on whichever one we want. Or if you had another MIDI track up, actually I could say, let's make 5 MIDI tracks. Then from my matching alternates, I can go to number 1, drag it down here. Okay. I can go to matching alternates. Let's see here. Copy it. Paste it down here. Matching alternates, this one. Grab it. Copy it. Move it down here. Matching alternates. This is if I needed to comp it. I want to get them all on top of each other so I can mute things and whatnot. But the point is loop recording, getting a beat done. It's all it's pretty intuitive. It's a lot better than it used to be. This MIDI keyboard helps a lot. So that's Shift K, which I think is the same shortcut as it is in Logic. It might be like Command K, but the new MIDI keyboard helps a lot for getting a sound up pretty quick. Let me show you how to quantize it. I quantized it automatically. Let me show you how you would quantize it after the fact. So let me get a little instrument going. Okay, let's see here. So I don't want to do quantize automatically, so that's turned off. I'm going to hit record, and I'm going to play it kind of loose, and then we're going to quantize it. Okay, now we want to quantize it. All we got to do is, with our grabber tool, double click on the MIDI region or the MIDI clip. It's already got all the notes selected for me. So now I need to hit my next shortcut, which is Option 0. Okay, it's saying, how do you want to quantize these notes? 16th note is fine. I hit apply. Boom, it quantized all of them. So Option 0 is one of my favorite shortcuts because I always need this quantize window when dealing with MIDI. All right, that is making a beat in a nutshell. Let's see here. We did getting an instrument track up quickly. We did making fades. We need to do making a bounce. So I'm going to go back to our multi-track session here. So I'm going to save this one. File, open recent, go back to multi-tracks. We got to make a bounce and we got to make stems. So we might as well make a little mix here. Okay, so I'm going to bring all my tracks back in on the left side by highlighting all these circles. Okay, and I'm actually going to then highlight all of these and say make active. We're going to build a little mix. Now, let's say I want to resize all my tracks. I got a bunch of tracks here. If I want to see everything on the screen at once, I'm going to hold Control, Option, Command, and down arrow. And then it will zoom out to give me every track in the session. Very convenient. And then if I go and hover between two tracks and I hold Option and I click and drag, it's going to resize all of them as well. It doesn't seem that important probably as I'm doing it right now, but it is something that you'll do 1,000 times in a session. How to just zoom out, how to zoom in on a track. If I go between a track here, I can make it bigger or smaller, or I can do all tracks in a session at once, or if I just want to see every track in the session, Control, Option, Command, down arrow, and there we call that bear claw down because it's all 3 modifier keys on the left side. Now we got to make a quick mix, we got to make a quick bounce, we got to make some stems. So let's make sure these drums are sounding okay. So I'm going to solo those. It's okay, let's get our bass in here. Now I want to see the overall level to make sure that things aren't too loud. So I'm going to right click these little meters up here and I'm going to go to output meter paths and I want it to show me the output meter path for line 3 and 4. And now I can see the level going out to you guys in Twitch land. Just going to build a quick mix here, not really focused on plugins today. Make sure these keys are sounding okay. Let's subgroup these vocals just to remember how we do that real quick. Grabbing all the vocals, right-clicking, going to move to new folder. We're going to call it a routing folder. Route tracks to new folder. We'll call it Vox. Okay, they're all going there. Let's go ahead and group them and color code them as well. So I'm going to select all the tracks. And then I'm going to click on the left side here. Let's make them all yellow. And now I'll go to Clips in Tracks. And I'll say the same yellow. So there, we made all of our vocals the same color. They're also already subgrouped, and they're going to go to line output 3 and 4. And I'm going to go ahead and put a compressor on there just to hold them in place, make it a quick mix. All right, let's say the mix is all good. Actually, there's one other thing I need to do here, which is to, I'm going to go with a master fader on this one. I'm not using the all instruments bus. I'm going to use a master fader. Now I want it to affect all the tracks, so I need to select the output to be 3 and 4 so it matches the output of all of the tracks I'm trying to affect. I'm just going to put a little compression on it again. So it's compressing everything. Okay, we like the mix. We want it to contain all that processing. We want to send it into our instructor. What I've got to do is make sure that I highlight the length that I want the mix to be. Okay, it doesn't have to be across the whole thing. It just needs to be across one track. Now, what Pro Tools is paying attention to is what tracks are soloed and what tracks are muted. So there's nothing soloed and nothing muted, so it's all going to play, which means we should have a mix of all the elements. So now I'm going to go up to File, Bounce Mix, or there's our shortcut for it, Bounce Mix. It needs to say mix sources line 3 and 4. If I did everything out of mon left and right, that would need to be my mix source. But it needs to be, you need to make sure it matches what path is getting to your speakers. So line 3 and 4 is what's getting to our speakers. So I need to make sure it's on line 3 and 4 here. Very incredibly important is the file format must be set to interleaved. I've been told multiple times by our 120 instructor, our 200 instructor, they always get mono files. There'll be the left side and the right side. It's because of this drop down right here. It cannot be multiple mono. But sometimes Pro Tools will leave it on that, and we have to change it to interleaved. You could change the sample rate and bit depth, but we don't want to do that. We want to leave it how it is. Now, it's going to automatically go to this bounced files folder location, which I can show you where that is. If I go over here to my desktop and I go to multi-tracks, it's going to put it right here in this bounced files folder automatically. So now it's going to go to that location automatically, but I could change it. I'm going to go to choose. I'm going to say desktop. We'll say open. We'll call it aha. Offline means it's going to go as fast as it can. And there it goes. The reason it's taken a while is because these are UAD plugins. So I'm actually going to make a shorter bounce so we don't have to wait for all that. I'm just going to do this little piece right here. Option Command B to bring up the bounce window. Aha, line output 3 and 4. It's definitely got to be interleaved. Desktop is good. We're going to hit bounce, and now off it goes. And there's our full mix as a bounce for 20 seconds. And if I go to my desktop, I should see a file there. There it is, aha, wave. It's not mono, because if I hit get info, you can see that it says that it's stereo 48K 32-bit. That's all good. Now a stem. Pro Tools makes printing stems an absolute breeze. It takes no thought really at all. I want to print a stems in my drums. I just solo my drums. I'm going to make sure it's only soloing the drums. There's our drums. To make a print or a stem of the drums, meaning I want an audio file that contains all the drums. A multi-track or an isolated track is when it's all the individual tracks. A stem is when it combines all the drums into one audio file. So I don't even have to think about this. All I got to do is make sure I'm only hearing the drums. Then I just bounce it. And I would call it drums going on the desktop. And off it goes. We'll give it just a second here. We've been going for over 2 hours now. Fundamentals. Still got plenty more to go. Okay, I bounce over to my desktop here. There's drums.wave. That's a perfect stem of our drum. So making stems is a piece of cake. Let me see what's next on the agenda. Make your bounce, printing stems, and summing tracks. So knowing how to sum tracks is good because it's the old school method. It's where these things originally came from. Let's say I want to make a bounce of these keyboard or these vocal tracks, and I want to do it all within Pro Tools. So I want to do a stem, but with a different method. So it's real simple. I can come up here to the vocals, and I could say, send this to a new track. We'll call it Vox Stem. How much do we want to go to Vox Stem? I'll bring it up to Unity Gain. Under Vox Stem, what I got to do is make sure I have a stereo audio track created. The input for it is going to be Vox Stem. The output doesn't matter right now. We don't need to hear it, actually. We just need to see that the vocals are being recorded down there, and then I hit record. And let me solo these vocals and get the drums unsoloed.
Talking away, though I don't know what I'm to say, I'll say it anyway.
All the vocals now are being recorded onto this track right here.
Shine away. Oh, I'll be coming for your love, okay. Take on me.
So this is a vocal stem. And this is the old school method. We printed it internally. We had to use a bus path right here to send it over to another track, an audio track. And here it is. Let me make sure we've got it. I'm going to output it to you guys.
To find you shine.
Which is correct. And our reverb is not included, which is just fine. But now the other part of this component is, do we know how to export this audio file? Pro Tools makes it easy, but it's not super intuitive. You would think that you'd highlight it and you'd go to File and you'd do something over here, Export. But notice there's no like export track option there. You actually do it from the right side. You do it from the clip list. So we make a selection. We click the clip list drop down and we go down to export clips as file, which is Command-Shift-K is our export option there. So I want to get this file out of Pro Tools, Command-Shift-K, and there's our option. So if I want to keep it the same, I want to make sure 32-bit. We want to make sure it's interleaved. We want to choose where it's going to go. We'll say desktop. And off it goes, and it's going to be called this audio1_03. If you double click with the grabber, it'll give you the file name, and I could change it if I want. But if I go over here to my desktop, I can see there's the file. That's our vocal stem. So that is the old school method. Sometimes we have too many tracks in a session. We want to scale it down. Like I recently mixed a project for somebody that had like 80 tracks, but it definitely didn't need 80 tracks. So we summed it down to 40 tracks. And to sum things down, that's what you would do, is you'd take all the vocals and you'd record them onto one stereo track. All right, let's see what's next. Making a balance, printing stems, summing tracks. Know your sample rate and bit depth. If we don't know what we set it to, you go up here to Setup, and you go down to Session, which is Command number pad 2, and it will tell us the sample rate and the bit depth that we set when we started this project. So then we know when we go to export this file, we know what to set it to avoid an unnecessary conversion. Pro Tools will not automatically set the correct sample rate and bit depth by default. We have to double check it because sometimes you want to change it. Sometimes you actually do want to export it as a different file type. All right, let's see what's next here. So we're on part 4. We did exporting files. We got an instrument track up quickly. Let's see what's next. Duplicating tracks and clips. Let's do that real quick because it's an easy one. Now I'm going to go back to another session because I want us to start fresh. I don't want to see all these tracks around. We're going to call that duplicating or duplication. On the desktop, we can save it. And I'm going to bring in those loops. So Command-Shift-I. I'm going to go to the files for today. So let's go to the loops. I'm going to grab all of them with Command-A. I'm going to convert all of them. I'm not going to add any of them. Add is bad. Okay, there's our tracks. Now I'm actually going to hide some tracks. So I'm going to go to this one and you can click and drag right down to hide all those. That's about as elegant as it gets. If you just click and drag, it shows and hides all your tracks. Very smooth. So we're just seeing this one. Something very simple here that we use all the time. Let's say I just want to duplicate this clip so it happens again over here. Let me make sure we can hear it. So let's say we want that beat to keep going. Very simple, Command-D for duplicate. Okay, it just duplicates the clip right across. Okay, you could also do Command-R, or let me see here. I think it's Option-R. So if I want to repeat this loop 10 times, boom, there it is. I usually end up using Command-D most of the time. Command-D now will duplicate all of that. So Command-D along with Option-R will allow us to repeat things and duplicate them horizontally. Okay, let me undo a bunch of that, get back to square one. Get back to one track and one clip. Now let's say we want to duplicate the track. This is Option Shift D. And now it's saying, what properties of this track do you want to duplicate? If you just want to duplicate everything, you leave it how those check marks are, and boom, there's our track right below it. Very convenient, very simple to duplicate tracks. There's plenty of situations where that comes up where we want to do it. Now, if I click Command Z, it won't undo it. Command Z will usually undo everything, but it won't undo when we create a new track. So what we got to do to delete it is right click on it and go to delete. They don't want to make it that easy to accidentally delete a track. Okay, so those are deleted. Let me see what else is on our list here that I wanted to cover. Duplicating track, right click on track, look in the edit menu. Okay, so we duplicated tracks and clips. Hiding tracks, deleting tracks, freezing and committing. Okay, let's say that we've got some processing on this. Let me put a compressor on it again. Let's say we like the compression on there and we want to render it to disk. This is the same as bounce in place in Logic. We're going to right click and we're going to go down to commit. And from here, we mostly want to leave it in the default, but we could say for the source track, hide it, delete it, do whatever I want to it, or do nothing. I'll say make inactive, and I want it to go ahead and render this other information. Like you could tell it not to follow the volume or not to follow the pan information. A couple other options there, but for the most part, the default settings are good. We hit OK. It's got to do its thing. And it's because I'm using these plugins. They're a little bit slower, but it's rendering it now to disk. So it's printing this compressor onto that audio file. Okay, there it is. So there's a rendered version. If I want to export it, Command Shift K, and then there's the parameters where it wants to go. Make sure it's interleaved. Okay, so that is committing a track. Let's say I want to freeze a track. Like if you've got too much processing on a track and you want to free up some CPU usage, you would right click, go down to freeze, and now it's going to do the same thing. It's going to render it. This time we don't get a new file for it. It's just kind of like behind the scenes it's rendered. This is so that the computer is not actually going to be using this compressor anymore. The compressor is already being kind of recorded. It's being printed. So now it's frozen. So now I can't do things to it. I can't edit it. I can't chop it up. It's got to stay in place like that. But now the computer's no longer using the resources to be able to put this compressor on there, although that probably wasn't very taxing. It's just that's how freezing tracks works. Same thing in Logic. They've got freezing as well. Let's unfreeze it. If your computer is struggling, you often have to freeze things a fair bit. So that's freezing and committing. Elastic Audio, how to change the pitch or timing. All right, this is a little bit of a different deal. But let's do something a little bit fun here. Let's go back to our multi-track session. Like I said, I'm being long-winded today. I want to cover a ton of these different points. So let's see if we can hear our session here.
Talking,
I want to make sure we hear all of our tracks.
talking away. No, I don't know what
I'm going to hit Bear Claw down so I can see every track. Okay. And now I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to go to one track up here. Now my goal is to speed up this entire session using Elastic Audio. So I'm going to hold Option and I'm going to click on the track time base and I'm going to change it to ticks, which means I want the track to follow my BPM or my tempo as opposed to the sample position that something is recorded at. It's good. So if I change the tempo, it should change as well. But I have to also turn on the polyphonic Elastic Audio plugin on every track. So every track is on polyphonic and every track is set to ticks. I'm going to double check that these are ticks. Yep. So now if I want to speed the session up, All I got to do is come up here to the BPM, change it to, let's say, 150. Every track is going to move. I think it's taxing the computer a little bit. That's one of the first things you can do with Elastic Audio is you can quickly warp the entire session, speed it up and slow it down. To do that, we had to turn the track time base to ticks, and we had to change everything to polyphonic. Couple more Elastic Audio things. Let's say I wanted to bring this vocal up by an octave. So I would select this vocal, and then I would go up here to Clip, Elastic Properties. Now it's saying, what pitch do you want this to be? Let's take it up by 12 semitones, which is an octave. All right, so we have a chipmunk sound there. That's one basic thing we can do with Elastic Audio. We can also dig in even more. We can go into this warp mode, and we can go in here and we can stretch or condense certain parts of the waveform. So I could change the rhythm on this word right here. Let me turn off the chipmunk voice. So I have to highlight everything here for this clip, change it back to 0. And now let's see, we change the rhythm now of the vocal. Yep, actually kind of worked. Today is another day to find you, shine away. Let's make way last a lot longer. So you could come up here, drag this out. Now it's extending that word way, probably by way too much. Shine away. Oh, I'll be coming for your love, okay. Works okay for the example. The other thing I wanted to show you with just some basic Elastic Audio. Now I'm going to undo that, but to undo it, I go over here to polyphonic. I say none and say revert back to the original. Okay. So I'm just going to solo it. Let me remember what was the next thing I wanted to do here was, oh yeah, because a lot of students always ask about getting that tape stop effect. Very easy to do within Pro Tools. So let's say at the end of his line here, let's say we wanted to do a little tape stop effect. Yeah, right at the end there. So to do it, we highlight the length we want it to be, the tape stop effect, that sound of a record or a tape slowing down. Let's say we like this length. You're going to go up to Audio Suite. You're going to go to Pitch Shift, and you'll go down to Verify. And the default setting is pretty good. We're setting a slow down. We want it to fit to this selection, and we want to automatically put some fades on it. And now there's our tape stop. Slows it down. You can speed it back up using the same plugin. So again, you can do the same functions in Pro Tools you can do in a lot of other DAWs if we know where those options are at. So that's, let's see if we did everything there. We did some Elastic Audio. We did duplicating tracks, more track options. Let's check out the next part. We're getting there. There's 8 total parts, so we're getting through it. Appreciate your guys' focus. I think we can be done by about 5 o'clock here. So I'm really pushing hard to get as much information here. So markers. All right, let's go back to this track that we're working on. Let's establish where the intro is. So I'm going to unsolo this. Want to hear everything? Let's move that speed back down to where it was. And so we could call this part the intro. Very simple. There's 2 ways to drop a marker. Number 1 is using the enter key on the number pad, and we would say intro. The other way, if you don't have the number pad, let's say we get to the verse 1, you have this ruler right here called markers, which needs to be showing. And then we click this little plus sign next to markers, and we would say verse 1. So as it's playing back, you can drop markers and say what part you're at, and then drag it around to where it needs to go. to remind you on the zooming stuff, so you don't forget, command brackets will zoom in and out. And then if you hold option and hover between the tracks, that's how you can zoom the other way. And if you hold bear claw down, that's how we can see everything at once. So drop in markers, enter key on the number pad, as well as the plus sign across the top. That's pretty intuitive, but here's the cool part. So let's say my cursor is over here, and I quickly want to shoot my cursor or my playhead to intro 1. Intro was the first marker I dropped, so to go to that point in time, I hit on the number pad, period 1, period. And it moves the playhead right there. To go to verse 1, I hit period 2, period. And to go to chorus 1, I hit period 3, period. That's awesome. That's very smooth. And that's why we like markers for mapping out the song parts. So that's markers. Color coding, we already did that. Channel strip presets. This is really cool too. These are some new stuff within Pro Tools here. So let's say that, let's go back to this vocal here. Let's say we want to put some processing on this vocal, and we like the processing, so we want to save it. Actually, I want to get these tracks expanded again so I can see them. Let me get to our regular vocal track right here.
Talking away, though I don't know what I'm to say.
Gotta get some of that reverb out of here.
Anyway. Today is another day to find you shine away.
All right, so we got our vocal right here. Let's say that I put a compressor on it that I liked.
Talking away.
Let's EQ it first, just to go by the book. Give it some brightness here.
Talking away. Though I don't know what I'm to say, I'm saying to you.
Let's say that I like these two plugins for vocals. Obviously, it needs a lot more focus than that, but just to learn how the function works, we don't need to go too much further. Let's say I want to save those. So I right-click on the track nameplate, and I go down to Save Track Preset, and we can call it Aha Vox. And it's going to save it right here. The default location is good. We hit OK. And now let's say I want to pull up that vocal setting on this track here. So I right click here, go up to Recall Track Preset, go to Avid. There's the Aha Vox right here. Okay. Now here's one of my other favorite ones for dealing with track presets. Let's say I really like a certain plugin and I want it to be available to me very easily. So if I hold Command right now, I'm holding Command. Now I'm going to go into my plugin selector, and I'm going to go to, let's see here, one that I can think of having right now. Let's go to Fab Filter, the de-esser. Use that a lot. I clicked it. It looked like nothing happened. So what I did was I held Command, and I went to a plugin that I like. And now when I click here and I go to get my plugin, look where it's at. That only came out a couple years ago. So if I want to put plugins up here at the top of the list that I like, I hold Command, I click the plugin selector, I go to the plugin, it looks like nothing happens. Then I go back into the plugin, and boom, there it is at the top. It's Command that does that. So that's very convenient. Kind of goes along with making a template, something of that nature. Let's see what's next here. Channel strip presets, plugin organization, a couple more little plugin organization things. So notice on mine, I've got these two plugins right here. They're right here at the top because I always want to use those two. Very simple to make that adjustment. We go to Setup, Preferences, and then it's under, I think, Mixing. And then there it is, Default EQ and Default Dynamics. You get to pick whichever one you want from the various plugins that you've got. I really like those options for being able to quickly get to my favorite plugins. And that track preset is amazing because, for example, I go to the master, I go to Recall Track Preset, I go to My Mix Bus, and it's got to do some work here. And it brings in everything on my mix bus. It's ready to go. I'm not starting from square one. Now, another power move that goes along with this. Let's say I really like the processing from another session. I want to bring it into this one. You hit Option Shift I, and it brings up this window called Import Session Data. So if I go to File, Import Session Data, what this means is I can bring in tracks or settings from another Pro Tools session. It's awesome. So I'm going to go into this other Pro Tools session that I worked on a couple weeks ago. And now there's all the tracks within it. And I can go down here to, let's say I want to get, the Vox processing. So I'm going to go to All Vox Bus, and I'll go to the Vox track right below it. I'll say import those. It's going to do its thing here. Let's see where it put them. It's right over here. And there they are that I just brought in. There wasn't actually any processing on them. Let me try one more that might have some processing. Hit open. I'll go down here to another track that might have some things on it. Let's try the mix bus for this. We hit open. It's importing the mix bus from that session into another session. Okay, so we can't have two sessions open at once, but why would we need to if we can import anything we need from another session into this one? That's something that I would call a power move. All right, let's see what's next. Let's keep on cruising here. All right, channel strip presets, metering options. Very simple, very important though to be aware of how we're viewing the meters. You right click on your meter, you have all these options. Sample Peak, Pro Tools Classic are probably the most used ones. I use Sample Peak myself. It's right at the top, probably for a really good reason. By default, Pro Tools comes with digital VU. It's not that helpful. Sample Peak seems to give us a little bit better information with our meters, just like our gauges in the car. You want to make sure you're viewing things in miles per hour rather than kilometers, because we are in the United States. We don't use kilometers per hour here. It's the same thing with our meters here. We want to view a meter type that is something that's useful for us. And it's going to be more useful for us to be on Sample Peak than opposed to one of these other ones, which are kind of designed to work with various desks, various Avid consoles. So like the meters on the desk will look like meters in Pro Tools. But we're not using a desk or a control surface like that, so we can stick to these top ones and feel pretty good about it. That's metering types. All right, metering options, color coding, dropping markers, channel strip settings. We did all that. All right, click track. I think we did look at that, although we didn't look at all the options for click track. We often have to manipulate the click track to be able to make the artist happy. So I'm going to open up another session here. Click track action. No shortcut for click track. We got to go up to track, create click track. The output needs to be 3 and 4. The metronome needs to be on. Now we hear it. Now, if we want to change the sound of it, we go into the plugin that automatically comes up on that track. And we can choose right here from the different sounds. And then the changing the division is very important. So to do that, I click follow meter to remove it, and then I can change the division of the notes. This is to be able to provide your drummer with whatever they need. You never know what's going to help them to play the song as best as they can. We need to be able to give them the click track that they request, and that's how we make that happen. Clip gain, very important and very, very easy to work with. So let me bring in a few files here. So we know that we could, zooming in, R and T this time, changing the output of all these to 3 and 4. So if I hold Option and I change the output of 1, changes the output of all of them so you can hear them. Let me see here. Shouldn't have been hearing all that. Oh, it was the click track going crazy. Let me mute the click track. And I want to hear just these congas. Now, if I want to turn them up, I could go to the volume fader. But if I want to increase the volume that's actually rendered in the file to disk, you have clip gain right here. Okay. In Logic, you do that with the inspector on the left side, but now it just raises the volume of this waveform. Now I could even render that. I could say, well, I want it to stay at that volume now. To do that, I would go to Edit, Consolidate Clip, which means render what's going on here to disk. So the shortcut for that is Option Shift 3. And now it goes back to 0 because it printed that clip gain information. Now it's just always loud, but I can always Command Z it, undo it. Clip gain is very helpful. It's available up here under clip, and then clip gain, or actually it's under view, clip, and then we can say that we want the clip gain info to be showing. If I change it to line, we get that line across the middle. So view, clip. We do not need that line there. That line is a little bit too much, but I like the info, which is just this number here. And that allows us to boost and lower that waveform. It's very intuitive. It's not hard, and it gets used every day. Let's go over these plugins real quick. So real-time plugin means I'm putting a plugin directly on the track. Okay, but let's say I wanted to render this instead. I don't want it to be real-time. I want to actually print it to the disk. So in that case, you highlight what you want. Let's say I want to reverse this. I go to Audio Suite. I go to Other. I go down to Reverse. And then it tells me to render it. You can leave these settings how they are. And there's our reverse setting. So it does things offline. All the plugins that you can do real time, you can also do in the rendered version up here. So it just prints them because the computer can do things offline a lot better than trying to have 100 plugins running in real time. It can print them and save them to the files, and then it doesn't have to be reading all those plugins. So that's pretty straightforward, the difference between those two, but need to make sure you feel pretty good about it. Automation modes. Okay, we do need to feel good about this. It's very fundamental. Let's go to another track here. Let's see what we got. I want one with the beat. Let me import one with the beat. Import audio. Let's go to chill beat and big beat. Let's add those. We want to do a little automation to this big beat. So I'm going to bring it up to the top. I'm going to send it out 3 and 4 so you all can hear it. I'm going to make sure we're only hearing that. And let's say I want to change the volume as it plays back. So the first thing I can do is go up here to Waveform, change it to volume, and now this is my volume line. Well, I can't immediately grab it until I go to just the grabber tool, or if you're on the smart tool and you hold command, it gives me this option here. So this is volume automation. The first one we're doing, the volume's just going to drop right there. And then the volume is going to come back in. So I'm holding command to be able to make another point, and the volume goes back up. You can treat it just like audio. So I could duplicate this with Command D, and I can highlight across and delete it. It's very smooth. The automation system is outstanding. But now let's say we want to do something in real time, like if you have a controller. So now we're going to flip it over to right. And now I'm going to give myself, you click right here, you get a pop out of your fader. And now as I move the fader, it's going to actually write the automation to the file. Okay. Now if I want it to follow that path, I would go over to read. It's going to read that pathway. But let's say I want to touch it up. It means that it's going to follow that path except for where I make an adjustment, and then it's going to allow the adjustment to happen, and then it's going to go back to the path. So watch how touch works. Let me try it one more time. So it allowed me to touch up that little section. It started on the right path, then I touched it up, and then it jumped back to the path it was on. Let's compare that with Latch real quick. Latch is similar, except it's going to allow me to do a touch up, but then it's going to stay on the new path. So here's Latch. Going to touch it up, and now it's going to stay on whatever path I leave it on. So it's going to stay locked in at that point right there. Not too hard. One thing that is pretty fun to do in Pro Tools, I deleted all that, is go up to the pencil tool, and let's say I want to do a triangle for the volume. I can click and swipe across. That's my volume automation now. It's based on the grid value. So if I go to 1 bar, it's going to give me a triangle for each bar. You have good control over this. We got to do plugin automation now. Okay, so I'm turning that off. I'm going to go back to, I'm actually going to undo that automation. Go back to my Smart Tool. Now a plugin to automate. Real quick here, I'm going to get a delay on here. Let me go down to delay. Let's say Echo Boy. We got a delay on this big beat right here. Let me go to time. Now let's say I want to adjust that echo time as it plays back. Okay, to do that, I click up here where it says automate. Auto stands for automate, and it's saying plugin automation. And I'm going to say that I want to automate the echo time. So I'm going to go with echo time 1. Hit add. And now we get that parameter from this drop down over here, Echo Boy, Echo Time 1. And now I can put lines in there just like I did for volume. And this time it's going to be for the delay time. So we can get some wacky effects. And if we have the plugin open, we should see that. So that's a little bit of plugin automation very quickly there. You can automate any parameter from any plugin that you have, and it's very smooth. Automation modes, rendered, tempo modes. We did that. We're getting there. We have 1 slide left. And it's a pretty simple one. So you should know how to do some basic sample replacement. Okay? So let me show you what I mean for that. Let me get a, let me go back to the, I can just use this one right here. That's fine. So I'm getting rid of the automation that was there. Deleting that. Bear clawed down to get tracks back to where they were. I deleted the big beat. No worries. I can go over to the clip list, click and drag it back in. Okay, and I'm going to go back up here to waveform. Let's say I want to add a different kick sample underneath the kick that's there. So I'm going to come over here to the folder I gave you, and we're going to go to kicks, and we're going to grab this kick sample. We're going to bring it in. Imported that onto a new track. Now we're going to copy it. Okay, and now I'm on tab to transients. I'm going to go up to my big beat track, and I'm going to hit tab. And it's tabbing over, but that's not a kick hit. That's like a snare hit. That's like a cymbal hit. That's like the trap hats. Now this is a kick hit. So I want to put this new kick sample right there. To put it in the right place, I have to hit colon on the keyboard. That moves my playhead down. Then Command V to paste. Then I hit P on the keyboard to move back up. Then I hit tab again. And I go over to the next kick hit. Then I hit colon to move the playhead down. Command V to paste the sample. Then I hit P on the keyboard to go back up. Then I hit tab again to move over to the next kick drum hit. I'm on that kick drum hit. Now I hit colon to move it down. Command V to paste it. P to move back up. Tab to move over. Well, that next hit's not a kick hit. So I keep hitting tab until I get to that next kick drum hit right there. Colon to move it down. Command V to paste it. P to move it back up. That's probably a snare hit. More kicks, and then you just start flying through this process. There's plugins that'll do this, which I use, but every now and then you've got to do it the manual way. I want people to know how to get things done without having to purchase things from Steven Slate. Okay. Now let's say we want to add fades at all those edit points. Swipe across them. Command F. Let's make them all really short this time. 5 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds. Okay. We can hit OK there. It still made the fades for us. And now if I send this to you in output 3 and 4 in solo, we have a new kick sound. Quick sample replacement, all right, from within Pro Tools. Sample replacement, we got to always know the Pro Tools version we're on. Okay, it seems a little silly, but there's new features that come out. Or if you come to me and say, Andy, I need help with Pro Tools, my first question is, well, what operating system or what version are you on? Once I know that information, I know a little bit better about some of the features that are available or not available. So to know, click Pro Tools, About Pro Tools, and there's our version right here, 2021.7.0. It's good to know exactly which one you're on so we know what options are available for you. Pre-post fader metering. This is a very important foundational concept, or I would say a textbook concept, something you need to know to work in the audio industry. Let me get this plugin off here. Let's say I want to do, I'm going to add some more reverb to that drum. So I'm going to hide all these other tracks I don't need. Highlighting all, hide and make it active. We want to add some reverb here. So I'm going to go to Send. I'm going to go to New Track, and we'll call it Drum Verb. Okay. This is how much do we want to go to that new track. I'll put it at Unity. Now over here, I'm going to put on my reverb. Go down to, I want it Valhalla again, just because it's so easy to hear and pull up, and it's a great reverb. So I want to make sure we can hear this. I'm going to solo safe it, make sure this is going to 3 and 4. Should be a big reverb now. Okay, now we are set to a post fader send because we've not engaged the pre button. So what that means is if I turn the volume down of the track, we lose not only the track, but we also lose the reverb. Now, if it's set to pre-fader, it means that this signal is going to continue to travel through to this location regardless of what we do with this output fader here. So that means that now I can turn this output fader down all the way, and all we're going to hear is reverb. So I like pre-fader sense because then I've got some independent control. I have this to control my dry signal, and this to control the wet signal. Now, if this is not engaged, these are tied together. They are no longer independent. Okay, that's the difference between a pre and a post fader send. We use them all day long in recording. So another thing to go along with that is pre and post fader metering. Not a send, but metering. So I'm getting rid of these. What you want to do is go up here and look at options and look for this down here. We're set to pre-fader metering. So here's what that means. So let me get this set to a reasonable level, and I'm going to put a plugin on there. Okay, here's the example I want to demonstrate to you. Just one second. Now, you guys can probably tell what's happening here. It's peaking, which is not good. I'm distorting it. It's showing me the pre-fader metering. Pre-fader means I'm getting an accurate readout of what's actually happening with the signal. It's actually clipping. It's actually really loud. But here's the problem. What if I switch it over to post-fader metering? Now the meter is going to take into account this fader position. Now watch the meter. It looks like I'm not clipping. That's not reality. In reality, I really am clipping. This signal's clipping, but we're getting a false reading because we're on post-fader metering. I flip it back over to pre-fader metering. Now we get the realistic meter reading, and it says, hey, guy, you are peaking like crazy. And now I've got the right information I need, and then I know how to make the adjustment. So I need our students to feel good about pre-post fader sends. Even if you're working on the top, you have to set aux 5 and 6 to be pre-fader. Anytime you're dealing with headphones, all the headphone sends have to be pre-fader. And then when you're dealing with metering, you need to know what your DAW is set to. That's the last hard concept for today. That's one of the more tricky ones, actually, that we've been through. This is a simple one. This is a good one. It's there to help us out. You have to go into Pro Tools Preferences. From Operation, I think it's where it was, Auto Backup. By default, it's not going to be set to this. It's going to be set to like 24 every 10 minutes. That means that it's only going to do an automatic backup every 10 minutes. No, give me 99 backups for every 1 minute. So if Pro Tools freezes and crashes, we can go into this location, session file backups, and there's all my backups from every minute. That's what we like, because a PTX file does not take up any space. Remember, these PTX files exist within the session folder where they need to stay. They're not on their own or anything like that. So we want to make sure that we have all the available backups that we can here. And every time you reinstall Pro Tools, you have to make this adjustment. Let's see here. We are almost done, my friends. Power moves. So we're going to end with making sure you feel good about many of these. Number one, changing the output of all tracks. We have to be able to do that. To change the output of all tracks, let's say I've got 10 tracks in here. Let me see my messages real quick to see if I'm missing something. Okay, so let's say I want to change the output of all tracks. Power move. So I hold Option, I click the output of one track, set it to the output I want, boom, they all go to that other location. So if you hold Control and select the output, you get this little plus sign. I didn't include this in the power moves, but I just remembered it. It's important. What this means is that the signal's not only going to 7 and 8, but it's going to 3 and 4 as well. So to do that is you go to the output, you hold Control, and you designate the new output that you want it to go to. Actually, now I think it's going to 3 places at once. It's going to all the ones with the checkbox. Now it's just 9 and 10. Now let's say I want to go to 9 and 10 and 3 and 4. Hold Control. Go to 3 and 4 as well. Now it's got the checkbox. I can keep holding Command. It's going out of everywhere with a checkbox. Every now and then you want to molt your channels like that. Okay, so if I want everything out 3 and 4, I hold Option, change the output of 1 to 3 and 4, and it does it for everything in the session. Now, let's say I wanted to cascade the inputs and the outputs, which is what you have to do when you're working with an analog desk oftentimes. So to do this, I want to select all of my tracks, first and foremost. Now I'm going to do all 3 modifier keys, which is Shift, Option, and Command. And I'm going to go to the input and set it to be 1 and 2. And then look what it did here for the rest of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's called cascading them. Now we're going to cascade the outputs. Right now the outputs are all the same. We want those to be cascaded as well. So they go up. Output 3 and 4. And now 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's a power move because if you've got 30 tracks, it'll take you forever to click them one at a time to change those inputs and outputs. We want to be able to do it quickly. Copying and pasting plugins. All right, we have to do this all the time. I like this compressor. I want to put it on another track. You hold Option, you click and drag, and there it goes onto the other track. So you can paste them real easy. I could put a bunch of plugins on right here at once by selecting all of them. I could hold Shift and Option, go to the plugin, and it puts them all on. The point I'm trying to make was that if I hold Option, it will apply a setting to everything in the session. But if I hold Shift and Option, it's going to apply a setting to only those tracks that are included in the selection. So if I want all these to go out 9 and 10, but I want all these to stay the same, I'm going to hold Shift and Option, go to this output and go to 9 and 10. Now these all changed to 9 and 10, but these weren't touched. Now if I want these to go to 9 and 10 as well, instead of holding Shift and Option, I'll just hold Option, go to output, select 9 and 10, and that moves them all out. It's a power move because it allows us to quickly change inputs and outputs and plugins for every single track. Let's say I want to remove this plugin from every single track. I'm going to hold Option, then I'm going to click one plugin and go to No Insert, and it removes all of them because they were all in the same insert slot of insert slot A, where it says A through E. They were all on A, so it removed them all at once. Adding a plugin to all tracks at once. We just did that. We just did cascading. Save, copy in. Let's say I've imported up. Let's say I've done this. I did something wrong. Let's say I imported these files wrong. All right. I just added them, which means they're not going to go to the audio files folder. It's saying they're going to play back at the wrong speed because I didn't select to convert them. That's okay. We're going to learn our lesson here. So now all these files are here. I didn't add them properly, but I need to save my session properly. This is the save your butt method. File, save, copy in, items to copy audio files, and then we hit OK. And then we designate the name and the location for the new folder. We're going to say desktop. It's called duplication, and we hit save. And there it made a copy of all the audio files in the session. Even though we didn't import them properly, I go to copy, and there's all those audio files. It copied them correctly. I appreciate you all very much for being here. 3 hours. I'll get this recording up there. I'll make sure you've got the guide, the files, everything to follow along with. And hit me up with any emails, questions, concerns. I'm there to help. And I want you guys to do that Pro Tools certification course with me, and we'll kick that off in February. So have a great weekend, great 3-day weekend, and I will be seeing you all next week. Thanks for being here.